I'm a photographer, and there is a nature preserve maybe 2 or 3 miles from my house. I don't live in the best of areas, so it is one of the few places I could go within walking distance to get a decent shot when I needed one to post on my social media, being 19 at the time. I was fortunate enough to have my mother drop me off on this occasion. The plan was for her to show up a little bit over an hour later to come pick me back up, to save me the multiple-mile trek to our little home. Unfortunately, this isn't how things panned out. Just as we pulled up, another car did as well, just a few seconds later. My mother was a little suspicious, because it isn't a very popular destination, but mothers always worry, so I assured her that we would be fine, and I allowed her to head back and do the things she needed to do at home. There are 3 different ways you can go initially: a path that leads left, right, and one up the middle. They all kind of loop back around to that same spot, but it is a solid mile before it does so. I opted to take the middle trail as this is the most scenic, but paused near the entrance as I was still adjusting my equipment and taking some test shots before moving deeper where I might potentially see wildlife or something worthwhile. This is when the man who pulled up after I did came in and proceeded up the center trail as well. I continued fidgeting with my equipment even after having it properly adjusted as I waited for him to pass me, and as he did, he attempted to talk to me. Something along the lines of getting good photos, which any photographer will get when they are out and about. I responded with something simple and kind, but also in kind of a dismissive tone because I had no interest in continuing this conversation with him. Something about him made me incredibly uncomfortable. So uncomfortable, in fact, that I decided to stay in that initial entrance area to photograph some boring-ass plants, even after he disappeared around the bend and out of my line of sight. I'm so thankful that I did that, because within 5 minutes he somehow managed to complete the full loop and end up back behind me. That loop takes about 15 minutes to get through, even in a hurry. He either busted ass to circle back to me or took a shortcut to do so. Noticing I was still by the entrance, he passed me again, walking through the exact same way he just did. That is when I knew something was absolutely going on. I stood there and watched as he walked the exact same path, even down and around the bend and out of my sight. I continued watching in the distance, down at the bend where I lost sight of him for a few seconds, and what do I see? Him peeking around the corner to see me. Once he noticed I saw him, he disappeared. This is simply when I said, fuck this shit. As soon as I exited the preserve, I took off in a full sprint, hoping I could put some distance between the two of us. Just as I was about to turn down a side street, I turned back to see him exiting the preserve and entering his vehicle. My phone was dead. I had never charged the damn thing, and I had absolutely no way to contact anyone. I was at the point where I contemplated running up to someone's house and asking them for help or to call someone for me, but I was worried I would seem like a crazy person. I turned the corner, and once again, we were no longer in sight of each other. I was out of breath and unable to keep running. I just began to pray that he was no longer going to follow me. Maybe this is all some sort of weird coincidence, right? Apparently, prayer doesn't work because within a few minutes he was back in my sight, turning the corner and beginning to approach the street that I was now on. My mind was racing with all possibilities of what he was going to do. But without much time, I just decided I wasn't going to give him an opportunity to do anything. I continued walking until he literally pulled up within feet of me and began rolling down his window. I threw my bag down on the ground next to me, turned in his direction with balled fist, and shouted with the full power of my lungs, "I will kill you if you don't get the fuck away from me." The angry little scowl he had on his face the entire time faded, and began to resemble a deer in headlights. He didn't know what to do. He then nervous utterly, "I have rights," before speeding off to never be seen again. I then had to complete my walk home, constantly looking over my shoulder and hoping he didn't make another approach. I'm just glad to have made all the decisions I did that day. I used to live in Orlando, in a somewhat shady part of town. The 5 deadbolts on my apartment door should have raised some flags. But I was a student, and there's a lot of students in the area, and yeah, I was young and not yet wary. Our less nice part of town bordered on a very nice town. There was a 4 to 6 lane road that ran through the area, and a jogging path that ran alongside it. Our apartment complex was right next to the road and the trail, and a little further down was my local gas station where I would walk once a day to buy cigarettes and other things. Because of the layout, it was easy for me to walk out my door, step on the path, and walk the 10 minutes to get to the gas station. Walking through the complex took longer. I often ended up taking the walk at night. Sure, I was a girl walking alone, but the path bordered this huge road with a lot of traffic, and right across the street was a busy strip mall with fast food places and such. So it wasn't like a dark path in the woods or anything. And hey, I always brought pepper spray, paid attention to my surroundings, etc. So one night, I head to the gas station around 11 p.m. As I'm walking around the car path, I hear someone behind me. Turning around, I notice, about 30 yards behind me, there's a car on the trail. Like I had to have pulled off the road and pulled up onto the path. I'm stopped and staring, and a guy gets out of the driver's side and starts walking around the grass between the trail and the road as he's looking for something. Something must have fallen out of his car, and he's pulling over to look for it. As I'm walking, I'm hearing something again behind me. I stop and turn. The guy is now 15 yards behind, still no headlights, and I turn as he stops the car. Or he stops the car as I turn. Again, he gets out, and it looks like he's searching for something in the grass. But now he's closer, and I'm a little creeped out. I'm not close enough to get into the gas station, so I pick up the pace. The next time I turn, he's even closer. He stops again. He stops again when I look, but he doesn't get out of the car now. I don't just want to take off to let him know he's scared me, but now I am power walking. My pepper spray is in my hand, but what does pepper spray do against a car? I throw a look over my shoulder, and he's only a few yards behind me. He doesn't stop this time. The distance is closing. Fuck it. I take off. I judge the distance to the gas station to be too far along the trail, but there's some trees and stuff on the other side of the path from the road, so I bolt to them, through them, and through a little ditch towards the light of the gas station, which is now right in front of me. It felt like the dude in the car was going fast. I look behind me, and I'm running through the ditch, and I see him through the space in the trees. His car slows down, and he's just cruising along the section of the path I left. I continue my sprint to the gas station, where I know I'll feel safe. The owner and the employees all know me. I make it out front, and I'm catching my breath. Watching the part of the jogging path that meets the intersection, I see the car clearly for the first time. It's one of those brown car truck combos with a tan stripe along the side. Dude drives up the trail to the intersection, flips on his lights, and floors it onto the main road, disappearing. Up until that point, I was running on a mix of adrenaline and feeling like I'm being stupid, but better safe than sorry feeling. Once I'd made it inside the gas station, I pretty much broke down shaking. To this day, I still don't know what those guys' intentions were. Maybe he didn't even see me, and he was just trying to look for something. Maybe he was planning to hit me with his car and drag me off. Maybe he was an asshole that was just trying to scare me. Either way, I had my boyfriend come get me from the gas station, and I'm never walking home alone. A few years ago, I received a random text, a photo actually, with no accompanying words. This is not the exact picture, but it was the same idea. Cute, odd, puzzling, but not alarming. The number was from out of state. I live in Arizona, and the number was from Atlanta. I don't know anyone from Atlanta, but I strangely knew the area code because it's 404 like the not found error on the internet. I'd looked it up several years earlier because that's the sort of person I am. The next day, I replied back with a photo of the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, which I happened to drive by as it was parked in Scottsdale. And a few days later, another photo came back in reply. A lit firecracker held in a feminine finger. I waited a few days before sending a long exposure photo I've taken of my friend, who was in silhouette, waving a sparkler in a spiral. I didn't think much of it. In my head, I explained it away as someone who was bored, perhaps someone a bit like me who enjoyed a little mystery. Over 5 months or so, we exchanged photos wordlessly every few days. At some point, it seemed perhaps hesitantly flirtatious, despite the fact that I didn't know the gender the person was at the other end. I sent a photo of a generic Fruity Pebble. I sent a photo of a bag of generic Fruity Pebbles and received a photo of a 2-gallon and received back a photo of a gallon of 2% milk. Received a picture of a Lego minifigure and replied with an empty 48 by 48 plate. One day, I received a photo of a road sign, now leaving Georgia, followed shortly by entering Alabama. I replied almost immediately with the city limits sign for where I live, as I was almost right by it when the Alabama picture came through. You may be ahead of me at this point. Now leaving Alabama was blurry, and now entering Mississippi was worse. Now leaving Mississippi never came, but now entering Louisiana came faster than I thought possible. Texas came half a day later. It was more than a day later when I got New Mexico, then Arizona. Okay, could be passing through. My city limit sign. It was recognizably the same sign, though a different time of day. I stopped replying after the photo of my own city limits came. Never got another photo. I changed jobs soon after that, and my cell phone was owned by my employer. I didn't ask if I could keep the number. Okay, so I've contemplated posting this for a while now. It happened a good couple years ago, back in my early teens. To give a bit of background, the street I grew up on was very suburban as a child. I was often able to stay out late because the area was safe and everybody knew everybody. Eventually this middle-aged guy moved across our street. He was nice enough, but he rarely interacted with anybody on the street. My friend knew his family and had disclosed to me that he had wife and children, but in the year or so that he had lived down the street, I had never seen anyone visit/move in with him. It was obvious, he lived by himself. So one night, I'm awoken by the sound of the doorbell ringing repeatedly and loud banging against the front door. I tried to go downstairs to see what it was, but my older sister appears on the stairs and immediately tells me to stay upstairs. I ask her why, but she doesn't tell me. Naturally, I was confused and curious, so I peered down the stairs and saw my mother pressing her weight against the front door. The door was locked and bolted, but she still leaned against it. I look out the window to see my neighbor angrily smashing his fist against the door while threatening to kill us. I was majorly freaked out by this point, and I began to ask my sister more questions. She tells me they called the police and Dad was on his way home. My father often worked night shifts. Eventually my dad arrived and a few other neighbors had come to see what was going on. They managed to get him away from the front door, and police eventually arrived and took him. Apparently the next day he had no recollection of what had occurred, and he had told the police officer to pass on his apology to us. As it turned out, he'd gotten insanely drunk the night before and had forgotten that he turned his kitchen light on. He then assumed that because he couldn't remember turning on the lights that somebody snuck in his house and turned them on, and it must have been one of us. My mother was absolutely seething, and rightly so. He may have sobered up the next day, but what would have happened if he'd gotten in? What would he have done then? I personally believe he was on more than just booze that night, but what do I know? Thankfully, he moved away a few weeks later. Dear creepy neighbor, let's not meet again.